The DNA test wasn't supposed to matter. It started as nothing more than a joke, one of those silly online trends people did when they were bored or curious or trying to prove their friends wrong at a dinner table. I remember laughing while ordering the kit, teasing my wife about what ridiculous results we might find. Maybe I'd have roots from some ancient kingdom. Maybe she'd discover she was 2% Viking and finally have an excuse for the way she slammed cabinets. Maybe we'd joke about our hypothetical future kids inheriting bizarre genes neither of us knew we had. It was harmless, stupid, even, and for a long time it stayed that way. The kit arrived. We spat in the tubes. We sealed them, mailed them, and forgot about it. It was a type of thing you do and then never think about again, like buying a treadmill in January or promising yourself you'll finally fix that squeaky door hinge. I didn't expect it to return, much less to explode into my life with a force strong enough to shatter it completely. But destruction never announces itself. It creeps. It whispers. It settles into your life disguised as something ordinary. And sometimes it comes in the form of a notification email months later. I still remember the exact moment it happened. It was early morning. Too early. The kind of hour where the world is quiet enough for your thoughts to echo. I was already awake, checking work messages, sipping coffee that tasted more burnt than bold. Then the alert popped up. Your DNA results are ready. I chuckled to myself. Hey! I called out to my wife. Our life-changing scientific revelations have arrived. She laughed back, light, casual, perfectly normal. A sound I would later replay in my mind over and over, searching for cracks I hadn't noticed. But at that moment, everything was fine. Everything was ordinary. I clicked the email, and I stared. At first, I didn't even understand what I was reading. The numbers didn't make sense. The matches looked weird. There were unexpected relatives, people I had never met, never heard of, and then, buried in a tab, I clicked only because curiosity pulled me forward. I saw a line that made my chest tighten. A child match. A close one. One labeled, parent/child relationship probability. 0%. The air left my lungs in a slow, cold wave. I refreshed the page. I checked again. 0. Not 1%. Not 5%. Not even a faint sliver of genetic overlap. 0. As in absolutely none. As in biologically impossible for me to be the father. At first, my mind rejected it entirely. I told myself it had to be a glitch. These tests weren't perfect. They had errors. They were fun party tricks, not courtroom evidence. That's what I kept repeating, almost chanting, like a prayer to keep my world from folding in on itself. I mean, how could it be wrong? My daughter, my sweet girl with my eyes, my laugh, my everything, she couldn't. No, it had to be wrong. I told myself all of this, and yet my hand was shaking. My stomach churned. My heart hammered in a way that felt too loud for the quiet morning. I heard footsteps behind me and turned. My wife walked in, sleepy-eyed, hair messy from the pillow, wearing one of my T-shirts, the one she always stole. She yawned. "What's wrong?" she asked. I should have answered casually. I should have closed the laptop. I should have pretended nothing was wrong, so I could gather myself, think clearly, breathe. But something inside me cracked open, raw, and sudden. I got the DNA results. I said, voice thinner than I expected. She froze. Not dramatically. Not in a way someone would notice. But I noticed. It was the tiniest pause, a single extra second before she answered. "Oh," she said, her tone force-light. "What do they say?" At the time, I tried to convince myself I imagined the tension behind her voice, the stiffness in her smile, the way her eyes flicked, not at the screen, but at me, as though scanning my reaction, calculating something. I turned the laptop toward her. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Her face drained of color, then flushed again in a rapid wave, like her body couldn't decide whether to run cold or hot. She blinked once, twice, too many times. And in that silence, longer than any silence between us had ever been, I realized something terrifying. She wasn't confused. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't even pretending to be surprised. She already knew. It hit me in the gut, harder than any punch. The world shrank suddenly, narrowing down to the blinking cursor on the screen and the sound of her breath shaking ever so slightly. Not because of the number 0, but because of her face, the unmistakable expression of guilt finally caught. The joke was over, and my life was no longer mine. I didn't yell. I didn't explode. I didn't even move. In that moment, when the truth was a silent, heavy fog settling around us, I simply stared at her, waiting for her to speak, for her to deny it, for her to gasp and say the system made a mistake, for her to laugh and accuse me of taking a prank too far. Anything. I was desperate for anything that resembled the woman I thought she was. Instead, she folded, like a wall collapsing quietly after years of hidden cracks. She sat down across from me, her knees weak enough that the chair scraped against the floor. Her hands trembled as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous habit she only had when she was lying or about to. "I can explain," she whispered. 3 words that never mean anything good. 3 words that felt like a blade pressed gently against my chest, waiting for the push. I didn't respond. I couldn't trust my voice. So I let silence settle between us, thick and suffocating. She took a shaky breath, then another, as if trying to pull courage from the air itself. It was a long time ago," she began, eyes darting everywhere except mine. "Before things were serious. Before we got married. I didn't think it mattered. I didn't think. You didn't think I deserved to know," I said, my voice low, steady, frightening even to myself. She flinched, because she knew. She knew exactly what she'd done. Her explanation spiraled into vagueness, mentions of mistake, confusion, a rough patch, and circumstances she made sound blurry on purpose. But none of that mattered. Not really. Because no matter how many angles she tried to twist the story into, the truth was simple. She had betrayed me, deeply, permanently, and she had built an entire life on top of that betrayal, hoping it would stay buried forever. The glass of water on the table in front of me vibrated ever so slightly, and it took me a second to realize it was my own hand shaking against the surface. I clenched my fist to steady it. "What about her?" I asked finally. My throat felt raw. My voice barely held itself together. Her eyes flicked up, guarded, uncertain. "What about her?" That's when the floor beneath my life began to crumble. Not because of the DNA test. Not because of the number 0. But because of her face, the unmistakable expression of guilt finally caught. The joke was over, and my life was no longer mine. I didn't yell. I didn't explode. I didn't even move. In that moment, when the truth was a silent, heavy fog settling around us, I simply stared at her, waiting for her to speak, for her to deny it, for her to gasp and say the system made a mistake, for her to laugh and accuse me of taking a prank too far. Anything. I was desperate for anything that resembled the woman I thought she was. Instead, she folded, like a wall collapsing quietly after years of hidden cracks. She sat down across from me, her knees weak enough that the chair scraped against the floor. Her hands trembled as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous habit she only had when she was lying or about to. "I can explain," she whispered. 3 words that never mean anything good. 3 words that felt like a blade pressed gently against my chest, waiting for the push. I didn't respond. I couldn't trust my voice. So I let silence settle between us, thick and suffocating. She took a shaky breath, then another, as if trying to pull courage from the air itself. It was a long time ago," she began, eyes darting everywhere except mine. "Before things were serious. Before we got married. I didn't think it mattered. I didn't think. You didn't think I deserved to know," I said, my voice low, steady, frightening even to myself. She flinched, because she knew. She knew exactly what she'd done. Her explanation spiraled into vagueness, mentions of mistake, confusion, a rough patch, and circumstances she made sound blurry on purpose. But none of that mattered. Not really. Because no matter how many angles she tried to twist the story into, the truth was simple. She had betrayed me, deeply, permanently, and she had built an entire life on top of that betrayal, hoping it would stay buried forever. The glass of water on the table in front of me vibrated ever so slightly, and it took me a second to realize it was my own hand shaking against the surface. I clenched my fist to steady it. "What about her?" I asked finally. My throat felt raw. My voice barely held itself together. Her eyes flicked up, guarded, uncertain. What about her? My daughter? I swallowed. When did you know? The way her face collapsed told me she had dreaded that question most. She closed her eyes and exhaled painfully. I suspected when I was pregnant. I wasn't sure. I told myself it didn't matter, because you were the one who loved her. You were the one who wanted to be a father. You were the one who... She stopped speaking when she realized her words weren't helping, only twisting the knife deeper. You were the one who raised her, the one who held her, the one she ran to with scraped knees and sleepy hugs. And she was right. I was the one. But I didn't say it out loud. I pushed back on the table slowly, the chair legs scraping against the floor in a way that made her wince. She reached out a hand instinctively, as if she could stop me from drifting out of her orbit. I stepped away before she touched me. I need air, I muttered. I walked outside, the morning sunlight harsh and unwelcoming. The world looked wrong, too bright, too ordinary for the devastation happening inside me. I paced across the yard, trying to breathe through the storm inside. Every memory felt poison now. Her first steps, her first words, the nights I stayed up holding her while she cried, the bedtime stories, the birthdays, the inside jokes, all of it replayed in my mind like scenes from someone else's life. A life built on a lie. I didn't blame the child. Of course I didn't. She was innocent. She didn't choose this. But innocence didn't stop the destruction from happening. Innocence didn't stop the cruel fist tightening around my chest. I stared at the sky, inhaling sharply as tears burned behind my eyes, not dramatic ones, not loud, but small and painful, the kind that carve themselves into you. I didn't cry for myself. I cried for the life I thought I had, the life that was never real. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me back. A message from her. She didn't come outside. For once she knew pushing wasn't the answer. The message read, "Please come back in. We need to talk." But talk felt impossible. Words felt impossible. Still, I walked back inside, not because she asked, but because I needed answers truths she had withheld for years. She sat on the couch, hands locked together, knuckles white. When I entered, she looked up with a mixture of dread and hope, as if she still believed she could fix this. I sat across from her, cold, distant, not out of anger, but out of survival. "Tell me everything," I said. She nodded slowly, and then the real story, the one she had kept buried, finally surfaced. She hesitated before speaking, like the truth was something she had to drag up from the bottom of a dark, cold lake. Her breathing was shallow, her fingers twisting together until they turned red. For the first time since the test results, she looked less like someone caught in a lie and more like someone preparing for a confession they should have made years ago. "It started before we were married," she said quietly. "I told you that, but I didn't tell you everything." My jaw tightened. She swallowed hard and continued. "I thought it was over. Truly, I ended it before you, and I got serious. I told myself what happened was a mistake, one I would bury forever. But a few months before our wedding, he came back. A name formed in my mind instinctively, but I kept it to myself." She clasped her hands tighter. "He reached out, said he missed me, said he made a mistake, letting me go. And her voice cracked. I didn't go back to him. I didn't cheat on you while we were engaged, but we did talk, more than I should have allowed. Talk, that word burned." She looked at me through glassy eyes. Then the messages stopped. I blocked him. I moved on. We got married, and I thought it was truly behind me. Her voice wavered, and she looked down at her lap. I didn't know I was pregnant until after the wedding. My chest tightened. She nodded, seeing the understanding and the horror form behind my eyes. "You think it's as..." I said, the words tasting like metal. "I suspected," she whispered, "but I didn't want it to be true. I convinced myself it wasn't. I convinced myself she looked like you. I convinced myself that loving you was enough to erase everything else." Anger flared, sharp and bitter. "You convinced yourself into lying for years." She winced as if struck. "Yes," she breathed. "I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want to destroy our family before it even started. You destroyed it anyway, I said quietly. Silence stretched between us, long and suffocating. I could hear the refrigerator humming, the distant noise of a lawnmower in the neighborhood, the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Ordinary sound that felt wrong now, mockingly normal. She looked up again, eyes filled with regret that came far too late. I always thought I would take the secret to my grave. I thought as long as I loved you, as long as we raised it together, it wouldn't matter. But it does, I said, voice cracking just enough to betray the pain I was holding back. It matters more than anything. She cried softly, tears rolling down her cheeks, her breath shaking. I know, and I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. But sorry was meaningless. A flimsy, fragile word compared to the enormous weight of betrayal she had built over years. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, hands clasped together. So who is he? I asked. Her biological father. Who is he? She froze again. A different kind of fear flashed across her face. Fear not of hurting me, but of something else entirely. I don't want him in our lives, she said quickly. I don't want him near her. I don't want him knowing. That's not what I asked. She hesitated long enough that my stomach tightened. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. He's someone you know. The world went still. Every muscle in my body tensed. Who? I repeated. She stared at the floor. Someone from before. Someone who knew I was getting married. Someone who had feelings for me he never let go of. My heart dropped into my stomach. Just say the name. She breathed in shakily, the pause long enough to make my skin crawl. It was Mark. A punch could have hit me with less force. Mark, my friend, my best man, the guy who toasted at our wedding, clapping me on the back, calling me the luckiest man alive, the man I trusted, the man I invited into my home. I felt cold spread to my body, numb in my fingers, my spine, my thoughts. No, I whispered, shaking my head. No, that's... She wiped her eyes. I never meant for any of this to happen. I never meant for him to... To what? I snapped. To sleep with you? To father my child? To stand beside me on my wedding day knowing the truth? Her face crumpled, but I didn't care. Not now. Not in this moment. He never knew, she said quickly. He doesn't know she's his. I never told him. I swear to you. I stood abruptly, my chair sliding back with a harsh scrape. Everything inside me felt twisted, rage, heartbreak, disbelief, humiliation, a storm of emotions fighting for dominance while I struggled just to breathe normally. Mark, my best friend, my daughter, my wife, all tied together in a betrayal so deep it made my skin crawl. I paced the living room, running my hands through my hair, trying not to break something, trying not to fall apart. She stood too, reaching toward me instinctively. Please, please don't go. We can fix this. We can talk to a counselor. We can... I stepped back, avoiding her touch like it burned. There is no we right now, I said, my voice low but shaking with controlled fury. Not after this. Her shoulders slumped. She covered her mouth, sobbing into her hands. I turned away, staring out the window, watching the world continue unknowingly outside, kids biking, neighbors walking dogs, the sun shining too brightly for the darkness spreading inside me. Everything I had built, everything I thought was real, it was collapsing, piece by piece, truth by truth, and I had no idea what I would do next. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. I sat in the dark living room long after she stopped crying, long after she went upstairs, long after the house became silent again. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, it feels abandoned, like something sacred has been taken out and never replaced. My mind kept circling back to one thing. Mark. Every memory I had of him had been rewritten in real time. Every handshake, every laugh, every shared drink at barbecues, every moment he called me brother, all felt contaminated now. Like I had been walking around trusting someone who had already betrayed me years ago and simply waited for the right moment to let it surface. And the worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was how normal everything looked on the outside, because nothing about Mark ever seemed suspicious. He was the kind of man people trusted instantly, charismatic, easygoing, always the first to help, always the first to show up, the kind of friend you never think twice about inviting into your home, which made it worse, because monsters rarely look like monsters at the start. Around 3 a.m., I finally stood up and walked into my office. I didn't turn on the lights at first. I just stood there in the darkness, staring at the desk where I had signed business contracts, school forms, birthday cards, life decisions. And now divorce papers would eventually sit there too. That thought hit me harder than I expected. Not sadness, not even anger, just finality. At some point, I turned the light on and opened my laptop, not because I knew what I was doing, but because sitting still felt worse. My hands moved almost automatically, searching names, records, anything that might give me clarity or proof or direction. Mark's number was still saved in my phone. That alone made my stomach turn. I clicked on it, stared, didn't call, couldn't call, because what would I even say? Hey, did you sleep with my wife and possibly father my child? That wasn't a conversation. That was a collapse. Instead, I closed the phone and leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. For the first time, I started thinking strategically instead of emotionally, because emotion was drowning me. And if I didn't regain control, I was going to lose more than just my marriage. I was going to lose myself inside the fallout. By morning, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to react anymore. I was going to verify everything. Quietly, carefully, completely. When she came downstairs, she looked exhausted, eyes swollen, hair messy, like she hadn't truly slept either. She avoided my gaze as she poured herself a glass of water. The tension between us was no longer explosive. It was dead, but death has its own weight. Where are you going? She asked when she saw me grabbing my keys. Work, I said simply. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. She nodded slowly, as if she understood that something inside me had shifted permanently, and there was no reversing it now. Please be careful, she said quietly. I almost laughed. Careful. That word felt ridiculous now. I drove straight to my office, but I didn't stay there. I made calls, not emotional ones, not accusations, just inquiries. Professional, neutral, controlled. I contacted someone I trusted, someone who could quietly dig without raising alarms. By noon, I had my first real confirmation that Mark had been in places he shouldn't have been, at times that now felt suspicious in hindsight. Overlapping visits, unexplained gaps, things that didn't prove everything, but started connecting dots I had ignored for years. By evening, I wasn't just confused anymore. I was certain that the truth was bigger than what she had told me, and that terrified me more than anything else. Because if she had lied about the father, what else had she lied about? When I returned home that night, she was sitting on the couch again, waiting, not like a wife, not like a partner, like someone waiting for judgment. I didn't speak immediately. I just looked at her, and for the first time since the DNA test, she looked smaller, not physically, but emotionally, like the weight of everything had finally compressed her down to the truth she could no longer escape. I spoke to someone today. I said calmly. Her body stiffened. What do you mean? I mean, I started checking things. Dates, timelines, messages, patterns. Her face went pale again. You don't trust me, she whispered. I shook my head slowly. No, I said, I don't. That sentence didn't come with anger. It came with acceptance. And that made it worse. Because anger can be argued with. Acceptance cannot. She stood up, stepping toward me again, desperate now. Please, I know I messed up, but I swear I told you everything I remember. I swear. Stop, I said quietly. And she did. Not because she wanted to, but because something in my voice made it final. I turned slightly, looking past her instead of at her. I'm not here to argue anymore. I said, I'm here to understand what kind of life I've actually been living. Her breath caught, and for the first time, she had no response. She sat back down slowly, like her legs had finally given up on holding her guilt upright. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was crowded, with everything we had never said, with everything we could no longer undo. "I don't know what you want me to say," she whispered. For a moment, I almost believed her. Almost. But belief is a fragile thing, and mine had been shattered too many times in too short a span. "I don't want you to say anything," I replied calmly. "I want you to stop managing the truth." That line hit her harder than any shouting ever could, because she understood exactly what I meant. She had been managing my reality for years, carefully, quietly, choosing what I was allowed to know, what I was meant to believe, and what she hoped would never surface. And for a long time, it worked, until it didn't. She looked down at her hands again. "If I could go back." "You wouldn't," I interrupted. Her head lifted slightly. I continued. "People only wish they could go back when they're losing control of the outcome, not because they regret the choice itself." That shut her down completely. There was no anger in my voice anymore, no shaking, no emotional storm, just clarity. And clarity is something lies cannot survive in. I walked past her toward the stairs, not because I was running away, but because I needed distance to think without her presence distorting everything. Halfway up, I stopped. Without turning around, I said, "You should figure out where you're going to stay." A pause. Then her voice, barely audible. "So that's it." I finally looked back at her, and for the first time, I didn't see the woman I married. I didn't see the mother of my child. I didn't see the version of her I had spent years trying to protect. I just saw the consequences. "It's been for a long time," I said. That was the last conversation we had in that house, as a couple. The following days moved differently. Not faster, not slower, just different. Like time had lost its emotional weight and become purely functional. She moved out within a week. Quietly. No dramatic goodbye. No final argument. Just boxes, silence, and the sound of life being carefully removed from mine piece by piece. The house felt larger afterward. Not emptier. Larger. Like space itself had been freed from pressure. I didn't feel victorious. That's something people misunderstand about moments like this. There is no victory. Only aftermath. The first real shock came when I spoke to Mark. I didn't go in angry. I went in factual. He denied everything at first, then hesitated, then stopped talking altogether. That silence told me more than any confession ever could. I didn't need him to say it out loud anymore. I already knew. The betrayal wasn't just in what had happened. It was in how long it had been hidden, how easily I had been living beside it without seeing it. That realization changed something fundamental in me, not my emotions, my perception. Because once you understand how deeply you can be deceived by people you trust most, you stop seeing relationships as safe by default. You start seeing them as something that must be earned continuously. Even then, I didn't collapse. I adapted. The children were the only part that kept me grounded in something real. I never spoke badly about her to them, never poisoned their perception. That wasn't their burden to carry. But children notice absence and energy even when no words are spoken. They knew. They always know more than adults think they do. Months passed, then paperwork, then court, then settlement. Everything reduced to documents, signatures, and legal language that try to sterilize emotional destruction into administrative order. She didn't fight aggressively in the end. Maybe she was too tired. Maybe reality finally caught up to her too. I didn't feel hate. That surprised me the most. I thought I would. But hate requires ongoing emotional connection, and I had already detached. What replaced it wasn't forgiveness. It was distance. A clean separation between who she was and what my life would now become. One evening, I sat in the garage alone after closing the shop. The hum of tools, the faint smell of rubber and oil, the steady rhythm of work continuing regardless of personal chaos. My son was there too, wiping his hands after helping a customer. "Are you okay?" he asked. A simple question, but not an easy one. I thought about lying, then decided against it. "I'm getting there," I said. He nodded like that made sense. And in a way it did, because healing doesn't arrive. It accumulates. Slowly. Quietly. Over time that doesn't announce itself. The final realization came much later. Not as a dramatic moment. Not as a breakdown. But as a morning where I woke up and didn't immediately feel the weight of what had happened pressing on my chest. The past was still there. It always would be. But it no longer defined the present. And that's when I understood something important. The DNA test didn't destroy my life. It revealed a life I had already been living inside. And sometimes the truth doesn't break you. It just removes everything that was already built on lies. What remains after that is not the same life, but it is real, and that eventually was enough.